Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. Today we're going to talk about overcrowding, specifically at HM Prison LEEDS, otherwise known as Armley Jail in Yorkshire. There's been a recent report by HM Inspector of Prisons saying that the jail is actually massively overcrowded. Hundreds of inmates are spending 23 hours a day in their cells, and that the prison is, although it's run by dedicated staff, it's understaffed and vastly overcrowded. And the apparent suicide rate is excessive. I believe there were 7 suicides in the prison in the last 12 months. Yeah, people hanging themselves, and they say that the reason that people are doing that is that they're just lost hope. I mean, if they're locked in a cell with a complete stranger who may be antisocial, maybe a drug addict, maybe illiterate, maybe mentally ill, whatever problems they don't really care too much in the prison system, If you get banged up in jail, you're just banged up in a cell, you're put into the prison and shut the door, and that's it, make the best of it, lad. Which I say is an absolute disgrace. It puts people at risk. And as they say, 7 suicides in 12 months. And HM Inspectorate of Prison said around 80% of the inmates are in the vastly overcrowded conditions. So it's completely failing, and one wonders why is this happening in the 21st century. Well, we're using a prison that was built in the 1840s or the 1850s, so it's about 170, 180 years old, this establishment. And when it was built to house something like 600 inmates. I realise that the population of LEEDS has vastly increased since those Victorian days, but at the same time, the conditions that pertained 170 years ago are far superior to those that exist today. And a very interesting comment was made on my post yesterday by one of the contributors here called Frank, who suggested that the 28-day sentences and the 3 months were nonsense. I would agree. I mean, the problem that we've got is that the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office, they have what's known as psychological think tanks. And what are these think tanks doing? Well, they're coming up with great ideas, like to slow the traffic down. I mean, I don't live very far away from the M6 motorway, and I've lived in this house for 35 years, and I've never, in the 35 years I've lived here, known that the motorway, which was normally a mile from my house, is frequently blocked. And it's blocked by lorries, trucks, large vehicles running into the side of bridges. I mean, how does that happen? And vast great lorries turning over on the motorway, shutting the motorway down. That's all. Listen, it's all part. I'm not going to be paranoid here, but I believe it's all part of this crazy psychological think tank that they've got in London that's coming up with, let's make travel so difficult that people don't want to do it. So you'll find, seriously, you go anywhere on the motorways, you'll find cones closing off lanes, a single lane. So they shut the motorway down to 2 lanes. That'll slow the traffic right down. Yes, it does. They're not doing anything on that lane. You'll see them, cones running for miles, 5 or 6 miles at a time. In Germany, it's a law that you may not work on more than 1 kilometre of the motorway at a time. So if they're going to repair a motorway, they do it a kilometre at a time. So they'll block off a kilometre of the motorway, repair that, next kilometre of the motorway, repair that, whatever it is. Not over here. Over here they shut like 9 or 10 miles of the damn stuff around. They're not working on it. It's all to slow down the traffic and to make travel by private motor vehicle extremely difficult. They're now bringing in Wales a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. In London, they're bringing this ultra-low emission zone. That, once again, is an attack on the motorist. It's to take money off us, of course. And, of course, these stupid speed cameras, I mean, where you get fined, I don't know what it is, £100 plus £60 victim charge for doing 32 miles an hour in a 30 zone and stuff. This is the kind of thinking that is coming out of the government and their psychological think tank, and they are not applying themselves to the problem of vastly overcrowded prisons. I worked in the prison service, and when I started in January 1975, the prison population was approximately 37,000. Today we've got more than double that. It's almost 90,000. And people are serving imprisonment for, as Frank, one of my commentators, pointed out yesterday, for little 28 days in prison. What is that going to do? You get somebody to 28 days imprisonment, they're going to lose their job. They're going to be socially ostracised if they come from a reasonable area. I mean, in certain areas it's a badge of pride, isn't it? Where have you been? Oh, I had a couple of weeks at Her Majesty's expense, a nice free holiday at Strangeways, stuff like that. But for a lot of people, imprisonment ruins their lives. So you get 28 days, it ruins your life, you lose your job, you're going to get questions from your family, you're going to be ostracised by the society that you have been accepted into, and unless you're from a rather dubious area, which many people are, I mean, it's nothing, no shame to that, but certain areas it is definitely not acceptable to be an ex-prisoner. So they're doing no good with 28 days imprisonment. It doesn't exactly help anybody. It won't reform anybody. It isn't a part of rehabilitation into society. All it is, it's a form of revenge. Now this has got to stop. In my opinion, listen, the minimum prison sentence should be 3 years. So, and you should be given numerous opportunities on the way to reform, but that if you hit a certain point, then the minimum sentence you're going to get is 3 years. And during that 3 years, you must complete a series of courses to enable you to function, to socially function in society. Because a lot of people that are in prison are semi-literate, innumerate, and have very little social skills or work skills that enable them to be employed. So if they had a minimum sentence of 3 years, people could actually go into society after the 3 years and say, well, I've completed the sentence, I have served my time for my crime, and whilst I was there, I did a very brief 18 months apprenticeship on the building trade. So I know how to work on preparing houses for be refurbished or for actually starting new build. So they go into society with some kind of skill and an idea as to where they're going. There's also the problem of people who are serious offenders, and to a certain extent I can understand, that society has to keep these people locked up because they're a danger to society. All right, lock them up. Let's think where we're going to do that. It's no good putting them in inner cities because they can't recruit staff. As I said yesterday, they're having to use detached duty to get staff to work. I mean, Buckinghamshire, it's incredibly expensive housing in that area. My son-in-law comes from somewhere near Aylesbury, and a standard terraced house in that area is going to cost you £200,000 to £300,000. I mean, if you're working in a prison, there's a prison at Aylesbury, I believe. If you're working in a prison there, I mean, you're not going to be receiving sufficient pay to actually buy a place, are you? And the underpayment of prison staff is hardly enabling the Home Office to recruit officers that are going to be of the calibre to enable them to do it. I mean, they're struggling through, and they're not making a very good job of it. So I believe that you take as a microcosm HMP LEEDS Armley Jail. That is a very difficult prison. It's a big, massive, old Victorian jail. It looks like an old castle, and it's there to intimidate the population, to teach them that in the event that you don't do exactly what society, the law requires, this is where you're going to end up. Surely we've moved on from there. Surely we have. But the prison system hasn't. The prison system is doing what it's been doing for the last 170 years. That's just putting people in there and saying, oh, throw the key away. Just let them do the time, and then they get out and make the best of it. Give them £35 at the gate, and off they go, living on the streets. They've lost their job, they've lost their family. Disgraceful. I mean, make the prisons almost like a school of rehabilitation. And as I say, if you've got a minimum sentence, then you've got, say, 3 years to actually rehabilitate yourself. And if you come back, then the next time it's a minimum of 10 years. And let's have some proper prisons, not these Victorian dungeons that they've got in the middle of cities. Build them in the middle of nowhere, or build them on an island, and have the staff on 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. You'd recruit the staff then, wouldn't you? You certainly would. I mean, I'd have a go at that 40 years ago. I certainly would. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, £50,000 a year. Give me some of that. The problem that we've got is that these people aren't thinking, or they're thinking in terms of who cares. People should care. It's our society. And the people that are committing suicide in jails like Armley Jail are our brothers, our uncles, cousins, sisters, grandfathers, our sons. It's disgraceful. That's my little rant for today. Here we are, Tales from the Jails. I'm not going to sing to you. Oh, I'll give you a little song, hey? Strolling, just strolling, by the light of the sun above. I don't envy the rich in their automobiles, 'cause a motor car is phony. It's Sadiq Khan's money duck. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to read you a poem here. This is Philip Larkin. This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. He was a librarian, you know. I believe he was in Hull. He was born in 1922 and died in 1980, so he wasn't very old, was he? 58. Anyway, here is Philip Larkin's immortal verse. This be the verse. They fuck you up, your mum and dad, they don't mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had, and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern, and half a time at others' throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. Philip Larkin, this be the verse. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Tales for today. I sincerely hope you enjoyed that. My name's John G. Sutton. Do like and subscribe, and have a look at my book on Amazon, HMP Manchester Prison Officer.